Yeah.
So we're going to talk about sustainability, and I thought we should start with, what is the sharing economy?
Oh, well, sharing economy is about sharing of items, space, skills, anything like that. It could be stuff. It's just about sharing items to stop consumption and start reusing and improving the resource efficiency of things. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's more like an organised way of sharing. So instead of just sharing with someone and you might get your item back or you might not, this is an organised sharing platform with both of us, whereby you can borrow something and someone is getting some layers of protection in for you.
How did you first get into sharing economy as a concept?
So for me, it was, I actually had a need. So I wanted to make some extra money and I was really racking my brains into thinking, I must have an asset. And then I landed on the fact that I've got a bell tent and people really love to camp in bell tents. So I just started renting it out to local people, to my neighbours, to friends, and made some good money on it. And then I thought, do you know what? Everyone should be able to do this. And so, and I started to look for a platform where I could put my bell tent with all the other bell tents that people can rent.
Because bell tent, lovely, but quite expensive, I think, to buy.
Yeah, they're expensive and they're quite a lot of maintenance and they're quite big and bulky to store. So, and you perhaps will only want to use it once or twice in a year or even ever. In fact, I know someone who bought 22 bell tents for their wedding.
Okay.
Used them once and they're still stored.
Yeah. But you've come up with something that would give those tents a purpose.
Exactly that. So I started renting mine out, and then there wasn't a centralised platform for all tents, and so I built one.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Tentshare.
Amazing.
Tentshare. And what does Tentshare let me do with my 22 bell tents?
So Tentshare, and in fact that lady has put her tents onto Tentshare, so that's brilliant. So if you own a tent, and it can be any tent, it doesn't have to be a bell tent, it can be a little tent, a pop-up tent, whatever you want. If you own a tent, you pop it on the Tentshare website and then wait for someone local to want to go camping. They don't want to buy a tent, they don't want to invest in it, they don't have the storage, and they just want to go camping for 1 or 2 weekends. They can rent it from you.
And this is a part of the sharing economy. When we're talking about it, this is one way then that I can share my stuff, rent my stuff, and which is also what your business is doing.
Yep, so RentMy is essentially the Airbnb of everything. So you can share absolutely everything that you own. And
that's nice, the Airbnb of everything.
That can be everything from tents right the way through to bike racks, to cars, to the Airbnb homes, that kind of thing. So you can put everything together and enhance that experience.
So it's a similar kind of thing where if I have stuff, I can rent it, but you're putting more kind of shape and structure to formalise that process a bit and also give us some protections, right? So because I'm thinking if I've lent my tent to someone, that if I lend it to my neighbour or something, there's no kind of protections or guarantee if they rip it or something. But with you guys, there's a lot more safety in that process.
Yeah, it's slightly more organised. So what the layers of protection that Tentshare has, the first one is trust. And I've been renting my tent out for the last 3 years, and I have never had an issue. And I think one of the key points of that is the fact that I give my tent to someone, and we look at each other, and I say, "Please look after my tent because I really love it," and they do. And then they bring it back, and we have met each other and had a conversation, and there's been that interaction. I think that's the first layer. There's also a couple of other layers that, which we can talk about later.
Yeah, the formalising it into a sort of a platform and a community means that you can keep track of your items as well. So you know who's got your item. You don't end up in that situation of, oh, who did I lend that tent to, or who did I lend that tool to, whatever it might be, and then that shared asset can sort of be passed around and is protected by insurances or protected through guarantees, and you know that you're nice and safe. So if things do go wrong, there's a fallback. It
seems to be adding a bit of kind of formality behind this really lovely community thing, which I think is quite an interesting aspect of the sharing economy, is this sense of community that you lend and rent to each other. And do you enjoy being part of that?
Yeah, I love it. And because I know that the people who are lending out their tents, they're camping enthusiasts.
Yep.
And so you don't just go to a shop and buy a tent and come home and think, right, what do I do now? What you do is you communicate with someone who's been camping for ages, and they'll be like, oh, remember to do this,
Yep.
don't forget to do that, don't forget to pack, your torch or whatever, and they'll give you extra advice and extra knowledge that you would never get from just purchasing a tent from, a new tent from any old shop.
Yeah.
So it's not even a compromise. You're actually getting the tent that you need for the trip that you want, and you're getting some extra advice and help and support, and you can change every time you go camping. You can choose a different type of tent.
Yeah.
And that in itself, that community aspect that you're talking about there, that knowledge transfer, that's something that has been sort of enhanced and needed through coming out of COVID. That ability to support us each other as a community makes a big difference.
Is that what you're finding with RentMy?
Yeah, so our first ever rental was a remote control sailing boat. So having that remote control sailing boat go out, it isn't something simple because it hasn't got an engine. Once you put that boat on the water and it's going in one direction, it'll keep going, ends up in France. So you have to be able to know how to get that boat back and forth.
Yeah.
And so that transfer of knowledge that you need to make sure you tack into the wind or jibe into the wind, those are very fine details, but they're really important that you wouldn't get necessarily from going just down to a remote control shop, and you certainly wouldn't get from online, apart from maybe watching a few videos. But now you're getting off an authentic person, a real person that's standing there saying, try this, do that, if this happens, try this.
Yeah.
And the results, the knowledge transfer is a lot quicker.
Yeah,
So
I love this aspect of a kind of a community of people sharing their products and things. And I think also there's a really green element to that, that you're giving these products and items or services a much better life beyond just your own usage.
Yeah, and the common term is, with carbon, is use intensity. So the more that you...
What's that?
So use intensity. So you use something intensely. So the more that you use an item, of course, it costs a certain amount of carbon to create it, to get it to you, and to be in your home.
Yeah.
And so every time you use it, that carbon emission calculation goes down.
It's decreased.
It's decreased. So every time it gets used, you're lowering the carbon footprint of yourself individually, but also of the item.
So I'm going to translate that. For me, the way I understand that is when I think of clothing, we talk about cost per wear.
Yes,
is that it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? That if I have this really expensive top, the more times I wear it, then the more economic it is for me to have had that. And then if I lend my top to someone else, that's getting even more use. And it's the same with kind of the carbon footprint and the impact of these products. Then they become better and more sustainable by being used more. I think that's
exactly that.
Really
you've summarised that really brilliantly. Well done.
But we've lived in a culture of linear consumption. So we take something out of the ground, we make something out of it, we use it for a period of time, and then we either chuck it back in the ground or we try and recycle it. More recently, we've tried to recycle it. Go back a little bit, everything was made out of materials that we keep recycling. So, if I think back to old buildings, if you look in some of the floorboards, they're made out of old boat parts. And we would just keep reusing everything we could to make things. So we've got past that level, and it's so easy now for us to
So
pull out.
RentMy kind of offers an alternative to that, that's perhaps maybe a slightly older way of being, right?
The sharing economy does, in general. RentMy certainly does. So RentMy as a platform enables you to stop that linear consumption, or at least slow it down. You can, if you are still going to buy assets, you can buy assets and then offload some of the cost and share some of the cost by sharing it with other people. So that item can actually make you money, reducing the cost. So it's not like a Klarna relationship, it's more of a, you can buy something and then actually have it almost paid for through renting it out.
But also, Tom, instead of buying something cheap within your budget, you could buy something more expensive that's going to last longer, that's going to stay being used, knowing that you'll be able to make some of that money back by renting it out.
The old adage of buy quality, buy once.
Exactly that, exactly that. And then share it.
And then share it, And so is this something you're expecting to grow? Do we think the sharing economy what's the future like for that?
It's massive.
Massive.
Huge.
The sharing economy is
massive,
huge. It's absolutely huge. You're starting to see brands coming into this space. You're starting to see thrift brands moving into sort of recycling and reselling old clothing. That is kind of a part of the sharing economy. It's more of the circular sort of economy, but it's the same sort of principle.
I think people are perhaps a lot more conscious of the things they're buying, what impact that's going to have. And is that something you're also thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I've stopped buying new
Yeah.
as a commitment for the last good few years. Occasionally, but we're all so conditioned to consume, aren't we? In
Yeah,
this
it's
society,
everywhere.
occasionally I'll see something shiny and buy it by accident and think, oh, I've just bought something new again. But on the whole, I try not to buy anything new because we literally have enough resources. We've pulled enough resources out of the planet to be able to have everything that we need.
Yeah.
And we don't need to keep pulling new things out.
A shocking statistic is that if everyone on the planet lived like we do in the UK, we would need 3 planets' resources,
Yeah.
and that's just the UK.
Yeah.
You know, if we suddenly turn that into the Western world, that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I think it's quite refreshing for me to see kind of businessy types actually acknowledging this and thinking and talking about it. That's really cool. I think a lot of the time that gets ignored or that's not part of the conversation, but it's actually quite core to what you guys are doing.
It is the core of what we're doing. Without a planet, there is no place to have businesses. So, you know, we've got to look after the planet first, and then have a business afterwards.
And look after the community. So what Tom and I are doing with Tentshare and RentMy is that we're allowing people to have an asset that they can make some money from. So you can be in your home, exactly like I did. I was like, oh, I need to make a bit of extra money. What have I got that I can use? And so I used my tent.
Yeah.
And I've created a platform, and you've created a platform that allows people to keep the money in the community to use our stuff.
The current
to not
cost of
have
living
to keep-
crisis as well.
Yeah, and
Well,
to
yeah.
not have to keep pushing our money up to bigger businesses where the money just goes to the 7th yacht or whatever.
I think that this is really interesting. Yeah, so because it's not just about being green and good, there is actually a benefit for me as a user that I can make some money from.
So it's a democratized economy, so everyone can make money.
Yeah.
Everyone can have a little bit of money.
Yeah.
It's not just the big businesses, it's every little asset you've got. You can start sharing it. It can be anything from one of these microphones right the way through to your car, to your house, or you know, you might just have your sofa for the weekend that you could rent out and just have someone sleep on. And that's what the sharing economy does and opens up. And having platforms that enable that make a big difference, a massive difference. And right now, when the cost of living crisis is going on, these energy prices are going on, we've got the threat from what's going on in Ukraine and with Russia, that if China get involved, where are we going to get our assets? Where are we going to get our items from? Where are we going to we can't keep buying stuff off of them and keep fueling this. So we have to find a new way to actually have items, your experiences in the UK and then eventually around the world. You have to be able to support that and sustain that.
So you would like to see quite a dramatic change in how we use our stuff?
Yeah,
I think it's going to be that. Consumption actually means to use up until it's all gone, and we're consuming the planet. So basically, we've got to stop doing that. But also, the thing that I think we need to talk about, Tom, is the fact that it's not a compromise. If you want to go camping, you have to choose one tent if you're going to buy it. And that tent has to be fit if you're a couple, and then you start having a family, you have to buy another tent because you've got to buy a bigger one. And then if you want to go away with your mates, you have to buy another tent because you want to buy a smaller one. If you want a festival. So what we're offering, and it translates to all items, what we're offering is that you get exactly the item that you need for the time that you want it.
Yeah, there's
you don't
something
have to
about
maintain
choice,
it.
isn't there?
Yeah, you don't have to maintain it. You don't have to look after it. You don't have to store it. You don't have to invest a load of money into purchasing it. You just, for a reasonable and affordable cost, you get the item you need.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk about how Tentshare and RentMy are going to work together in the future, but how that relationship's going to grow, because we can see that Tentshare clearly have got their own selection of tents. You're growing your community really nicely. You've got some fantastic content going out on the socials. It's absolutely fantastic, and we can see that relationship, that people are going to want to have a centralized location to be able to rent their items, a bit like Amazon did, where they just pulled everything into one location. We're looking forward to working with you where you'll be able to jump on the RentMy platform. You'll be able to rent out tent items from Tentshare. You'll be able to add a bike to that order, and you'll be able to have other items. So you'll be able to get all these different things within one location, and then we continue to grow our community across the board, and we continue to increase that sharing economy feel throughout the planet.
Yeah, you're pulling together lots of different users and really creating a really amazing experience.
Yep.
If I am, I'm never going to go camping, I have to confess. But I'm a fan of running water. But
I'm going to make you camp.
yeah, okay. If it's a bell tent, maybe then
Yeah.
actually.
And
I
a
think-
sheepskin.
Okay, yeah, I could maybe get into that.
These rentals are going up quite quickly.
Well, but maybe not though. If I'm renting all of this stuff,
Yeah.
and have you like the little log burnery things? I've seen they look great.
You can rent those.
Yeah,
You're just going to
really.
carry that onto a field.
People do. They
Yeah.
have.
Or you can ask the person you're renting from to put it up for you.
Yeah, really. See, because I wouldn't know the first thing about how to do anything.
Yeah,
like
exactly. So you can either ask them for their expertise, and they can tell you, or they've done a little video or whatever.
Yeah.
Or for some of the users, some of the tent sharers will pitch the tent for you. In fact, they prefer to do it because they know that they will do it in the correct way.
Yeah.
So they will offer that service.
Because there was something you were talking about before, the knowledge thing. What was that?
The knowledge transfer. So
Knowledge transfer.
you're just basically telling people or guiding people how to do things.
That's
so
another
do it in the
part
right way.
of this, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, yeah, it's just a social side of it. So we've got the environmental side, you've got the social side. Pulling these communities together, so the ability for Rebecca's tent to be rented on RentMy means that all of our users will be vetted, so that they're nice and safe. So we know that we've checked these users, they come on board, we've said, yeah, they're all safe users. We get rid of all the bad actors out of the platform, and so the security of the item and the security of the user is then in a safe place.
And I think security is an important part of it that is worth having a chat about, because if I'm lending out stuff or renting stuff, I want to know that there are protections in place for that process.
Yep. Well, I think so we vet users as they come on the platform, so we know who they are. We make sure that if as the item comes in, you take photos of the item when you go and collect it, and you make sure it's as described. You don't get into a kayak that's got a hole in it, get halfway out to the river, and then suddenly go, oh yeah, there's a hole in this kayak, and suddenly you've got to try and get back. Doesn't quite work like that. So you always make sure that you've rented the item and you're happy with the item. If you get there and it's not as described, you can just turn around and say, really sorry, it's not quite what I need. I'm off.
Yeah.
The owner has then met the renter. They know who the person who is looking after their
That's
item.
that kind of face-to-face thing.
And
we
that
were talking about
face-to-face
before.
thing's really, really important.
Yes.
If you leave it and just say, well, yeah, it's outside, it's over there, that's it. Yeah, that's great. But you can't, that little bit extra of contact makes a big difference. We will have contactless handovers, and the video and the photos around that are very important. Making sure that the app, you take photos, you get the messaging right, you say, right, this is where the item is safely stored, make sure you put it back like this, please, etc., etc. But even just messaging someone, having that direct connection, that's far more than just going to someone like, I don't know, a car hire place or a tool hire place where they just give it to you, say, there you go on, off you go, and that's it. So
Yeah.
it makes a big difference.
And there's a conversation that goes on. I can see that they, when people are renting tents from each other, I can see there's a conversation that goes on the Tentshare platform where people are saying, what are you using it for? Oh, would you like to borrow this as well?
Yeah.
You know,
lovely.
I'm not sure what I'm doing. Could you help me out? And people are like, yeah, absolutely. So the whole conversation, so a relationship builds even before they meet. And that you know, that really helps with the
That flexibility is massive as well, because what you see is that flexibility. I recently had a wood plane go out. It was a one-day hire. Now I wasn't around at the weekend, so I just said, look, you know, why don't you come and collect it on midweek? It gives you a few extra days to borrow it. He had it for 6 days. Dropped it off. £1 a day is what the rental worked out at, but it was £6 for 1 day.
Yeah.
He's just moved in. He's just had new carpets fitted. And so he's gone around, shortened the doors, made everything fit. And that's a really useful sort of tool that he hasn't got to go and buy. He managed to use really quickly. He now knows that it's an asset. And next time he wants to rent off me, I'll be able to just change the price as his request comes through and just say, yeah, he was a good renter, bring the price down.
So there's a kind of negotiation that goes on.
There can be,
Yeah, there
Yeah.
can be. Yeah.
But having tools built in that way that allow that, having software that allows you to do that, that's a big part of it, and that's what we're building at RentMy.
Yeah. I think a lot of what you're talking about is trust as well, isn't it? Within this sharing community,
Yep.
there's a big element of trust.
Yep.